Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to talk about the next gen forehand and the next gen two-handed backhand and whether this is something that you should adapt into your game, because let's face it, more and more players are utilizing the next gen forehand and also the next gen backhand. Now, I've made full-length videos on both strokes numerous times, but let me give you a quick summary of both. So a next-gen forehand is a style of preparation where the tip of the racket is pointed towards the outside and the strings are turned backwards. This is a very different style from a classic modern forehand racket drop where the racket might go in different directions, but generally what you'll see is players loop the racket and drop it to their side or drop it in the back. The unique thing about the next gen forehand is that the racket is turned this way, it's parallel to the ground, and the tip of the racket is pointing towards the outside. A very subtle difference, but if you take a look at the modern forehand, the racket drops to the side and then goes into the lag position. It's a much smaller area the racket covers as opposed to going all the way from the side, and from here into the lag is a much bigger area. So when you look at this type of stroke in real time, the stroke looks more whippy. The next gen two-handed backhand is somewhat similar to the next gen forehand because the players will put their racket in the preparation stage pointing towards the side. Now, the key characteristic on the next gen two-handed backhand is that players wait, just like they do on the forehand, to initiate the forward approach towards the ball, which naturally results in a whippier motion. Because if you take a look at the modern two-handed backhand, which has many different styles, I recommend that you watch my video where I compare the classic two-hander to the modern two-hander to the next-gen two-hander. But a modern two-handed backhand, even with its different styles, has more of a gradual acceleration. And it doesn't have that whip factor. Players such as Djokovic will loop the racket in the back and then initiate the forward movement that also includes the racket drop prior to the racket going back into a neutral position at contact. So on the next gen two-handed backhand, the acceleration is not gradual at all. Players wait in this position until the ball is extremely close, and when they're ready to accelerate, the racket whips into a lag, drops beneath the contact point, and then straightens back out at contact. So why are players utilizing these strokes? Because guess what? We take the best players in the world, we study their technique, and we cannot say that they have poor technique just because they're not utilizing the technique from former greats. We cannot say that Jannik Sinner has a poor forehand because it's next gen. No, Jannik Sinner has one of the best forehands in tennis history. You cannot say that Carlos Alcaraz has a poor backhand. You can make an argument that Alcaraz's backhand, despite it being next-gen style, is more solid and consistent compared to his forehand. He makes more errors off his forehand, and by the way, he has a phenomenal forehand compared to his backhand side. So we look at these two guys, Sinner and Alcaraz, the best two players in the world, and we have to take their strokes as one of the best ways to hit the tennis ball. We cannot make an argument that these strokes are incorrect. Now, I'm not singling out Sinner and Alcaraz. There are so many players now in the top 100 that have a next-gen style forehand. There are so many players now in the top 100 that have a next-gen style two-handed backhand. This is not an accident. This is the natural evolution of the tennis game. See, rackets keep getting lighter and more maneuverable. The string technology has improved in a way where players have the ultimate freedom to rip the balls. So naturally, with the whippier rackets and the improved string technology where players can rip like crazy without sacrificing control, you're gonna see whippier strokes. And that is, in my opinion, why the next gen forehand and the next gen two-handed backhand has naturally evolved into today's tennis game. Because guess what? We as tennis coaches, we're not necessarily gonna like when a player is whippy. Why? Because on the forehand, the racket has more ground to cover. A lot of coaches will identify this as a possible weakness. It makes more sense to have a tighter, cleaner racket drop, such as Federer, for example, where the racket drops to the side and then whips back like this. On the two-handed backhand, a lot of us coaches are going to take Novak Djokovic as the example of the greatest two-handed backhand in history, and Djokovic has a very clean preparation where he loops the racket, and after the ball has bounced, Novak will start to drop the racket and then gradually accelerate. This is a cleaner looking stroke. You can make an argument that this is a better looking stroke, both the modern forehand and the modern two-handed backhand. But if a player can execute a next-gen forehand correctly, if a player can execute a next-gen two-handed backhand correctly, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with those two strokes if the fundamentals are present. So let's quickly discuss the fundamentals, and now I'm going to transition also into my recommendations for you guys at the recreational level. So the fundamental element on the forehand that you don't want to sacrifice is the lag. So let's say you try to copy Sinner's forehand, you stick your racket out like this and you accelerate forward, but your acceleration is poor and now the racket doesn't whip back and goes to about right here. You don't have a sufficient lag on your forehand and you have made your forehand worse because of this preparation. In that case, it would make more sense to have more of a modern forehand style where you drop the racket a little bit further behind, and now it's going to be more natural for the racket to lag behind. If you are a junior, or if you're a recreational player who's very talented and can pull off a next-gen forehand with this type of preparation and you achieve a full lag, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with this particular style. Now, regarding the next-gen two-handed backhand, it's a tad more complex. The recreational players might think that they're hitting a next-gen two-handed backhand, but they're actually not, because the most important element of a next-gen two-handed backhand is its unique timing. So you might have a preparation like Alcaraz and stick your racket out like this. But if you start taking your racket back after the ball has bounced, now you don't have a next-gen two-handed backhand anymore. You have a modern two-handed backhand. The main characteristic of a next-gen two-handed backhand is its unique timing. If you want to get that whip and that 0 to 100 acceleration, you have to wait in this position until the ball is literally right in front of your nose, and only then will you get that whip effect and the ability to accelerate very fast into the contact. And I've tried this many times, and I have a good two-handed backhand and I can't do it. Even when I think I'm doing it, I take a look at the slow-mo footage and I'm actually not doing it. I'm taking my racket back way too early and I'm not getting that whip effect. Is there something wrong if you can't pull off a next-gen two-handed backhand? Not at all. There's absolutely nothing wrong with hitting two-handed backhands without the whip effect. There are still many players with a modern two-handed backhand style, for example, Zverev and Djokovic. If you find comfort in sticking the racket out to the side, this is a stylistic element of the modern two-handed backhand as well, and then after the ball is bounced, you start taking the racket back, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that particular style. You just don't have a next-gen two-handed backhand, even though you might think you do. Now, let's say that you are a player who has a next-gen two-handed backhand, and you are indeed able to wait very long with the racket to the side, and you get that 0 to 100 whip effect. Well, even here, you have to possess the fundamentals of a two-handed backhand. And what are those? Well, you have to achieve a full lag. So if you wait with the racket to the side and you start accelerating forward and the racket doesn't whip back, it goes from here to here, you don't have a fundamentally sound two-handed backhand. Also, if you wait accurately in this position until the ball is very close to the contact and you end up achieving a lag, but you don't end up dropping the racket head beneath the ball, you don't have a fundamentally sound two-handed backhand. If you take a look at the vast majority of next-gen two-handed backhands on tour, despite the fact that players are waiting with the racket to the side, they achieve a full lag and the racket drop prior to the moment of contact. So guys, there's nothing wrong with the next-gen strokes. This is the natural evolution of tennis. What's most likely going to happen to you if you are a player who has played tennis for quite a long time, if you try to adapt these next-gen strokes, most likely you're not going to have a lot of success. And guess what? There's absolutely nothing wrong with having a modern forehand or a modern two-handed backhand for the reasons that I explained in this video. And most importantly, if you are a player with next-gen strokes, maybe you are a junior watching this video, I want to tell you that there's nothing wrong with your next-gen forehand, with your next-gen two-handed backhand, if you possess the fundamentals that I described in today's video.